welcome to another episode of Next Gen Equipping. My name is Brian, and our passion here is to equip other youth leaders to give their faith away through helpful online resources. If you find these videos helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. We would greatly appreciate it. Today's video is on how to write a winning newsletter, and in some ways it's kind of connected to the other videos that we've done on how to write a winning vision statement and how to prepare for a winning one-on-one fundraising appointment with the donor. The idea here is that once we find people that want to partner with us in ministry, we need to be able to maintain that connection with them. So enjoy the video. I hope you'll find it helpful. Take care. Today's episode is on how to write a winning newsletter. You know, once somebody comes onto your ministry team and you get a whole bunch of people that are excited about what God is doing through you and through the ministry that He's called you to, it's so crucial that we maintain that connection with our support team. And an effective way to do that is to learn how to write winning newsletters. Let me tell you, I've been on the mission field in ministry for more than 16 years, and we support a number of missionaries, and we get a lot of newsletters that come to us. We have written a lot of newsletters over the past 16 years. And I've just learned a couple of things that have proven to be super, super helpful in how to communicate with our donors. In fact, the feedback that we get from our support team really is very, very encouraging. And I'm going to show you a stat later on in this video to help validate that point that I'm making. And I think you'll agree that what I'm going to share with you, if you apply what we're going to share with you, I think it could greatly increase your communication with your support team. So let's dive in. I've organized today's episode in a simple problem solution application outline. And so let's just dive right in. Here are some problems that we as communicators have to overcome as we write our newsletters. And this could be whether you're writing a hard copy newsletter that gets mailed out or whether it's an email that gets emailed out. So the first problem is this, is that people are just simply busy. That there is so many things that are competing for folks' time and attention that if they don't, it's often the case where they just don't have time to do everything that comes to them. And we have to overcome that. We have to be sensitive to that as we are writing our newsletters to them. Also, people are drowning in information and option overload. Think of all of the information that comes to you in the day, whether it's through the radio, whether it's through television, or whether it's just the commercials, the ads that pop up on your apps and on your phone. And then think of all the options that we have available to us. I mean, it is overwhelming, and it's hard for people's attention to be focused on any one thing for a long, sustained period of time. It's possible, but it's a hurdle that we have to overcome. Here's some quick stats I want to share. The average attention span in 2000 was 12 seconds. Now, that might not seem very long, but consider this. Today, in 2013, the average attention span was 8 seconds, all right? So that means in just a very short period of time, in just 13 years, the average attention span dropped 4 seconds, which is incredible. Also, consider this, that the industry-wide email open rate for nonprofits is 22.9%. And also consider this reality, that the response rate for direct mail, so if you're going to be printing off a newsletter and stuffing it and mailing it out, the average open rate or response rate is about 4.4%. And the other thing is that number is trending downward. So that's a major problem. And as we write our newsletters, we at least need to be sensitive to what the recipient of our newsletter is going to be is going through and what they're having to overcome, and we need to be sensitive to that. All right, so in light of the problem, in light of present reality, then what is a solution, right? Because it's one thing to be able to identify a problem, but it's a whole other matter to introduce a solution that's going to work. So I like to think of these as guiding principles. The first guiding principle is this, and I use these for every newsletter that we send out. And although I will say that it is impossible to over communicate with your support team. Maybe a combination of hard copy newsletter, maybe a postcard every now and then, or email newsletters is probably the most ideal. And some of our newsletters are a little bit better than others, but as a general rule, I try to stick to these guiding principles. The first one is this, is that we always try to keep our newsletters text light and picture heavy. In addition to that, we try to let the captions tell the story. All right, so I never put a picture into a newsletter that doesn't have a caption underneath it. And the idea is this, is that most people's eye is going to gravitate toward pictures, right? And so we want to keep a lot of pictures in there. And if they only read the caption, then the captions become the cliff notes for the whole newsletter, and the text amplifies what's in the caption. So everything that we put in there is super, super intentional. So that's the first guiding principle. The second one is this, and this is key. We try to make them short enough that they can be read in 2 minutes or less, all right? And this goes back to the problem. People are so busy, people are so easily distracted, and it's not that they don't care, it's just that our world has a lot of distractions in it, and I try to keep our newsletters simple enough that they can be read in 2 minutes or less. And honestly, 2 minutes may be even too long. But it provides a good framework, a good guiding principle for Bonnie and I as we write our newsletters to supporters. Let me say this, brevity takes time. Don't think that you're just going to crank a newsletter out in one afternoon and send it the next day. I've got a bonus tip later that addresses that point. I will say this, we have found that less is always more. That if our newsletter, or the people who receive our newsletters, if they read the little bit that I send out, it's going to mean a whole lot more, and I'm going to communicate a whole lot more than if I try to communicate too much and it takes too long for somebody to read. So I have found a good guiding principle and a way to keep our newsletters under 2 minutes is that to follow that principle of less is more. And then I always try to give strong bias to towards stories of changed lives. I think when I open a newsletter, all right, and I'm reading about a ministry that I support and that I'm behind, man, I love, and I'm always so encouraged by those little pieces of evidence where I see God at work in a person's life and somebody taking a closer step in their walk with Jesus. I'm always encouraged by that, and that's the kind of stuff that I want to read about. And so that's where I always give in the newsletters I send out a strong bias towards stories of changed lives. And the third thing is this, or the fourth thing, is that even though we keep our text light in our newsletters, write well. All right, this doesn't mean that you ignore the text altogether. Make your text count. So become a good writer. And for some of you, this may become a targeted growth area for you. Because I will tell you, there is a lot of bad writing that we have seen come through the missionaries that we support and the newsletters that we have received over the years. And when somebody is sloppy in their writing, here's what it communicates to me, that they are sloppy in other areas of their life. But if they are tight, if they are concise, if they are purposeful in their writing and in their communication, then it's probably a good indicator that they are purposeful in other areas of their ministry as well. So write well. Now, that may introduce for you a question of, okay, so how do I write well? What are some things that I could do to become a better writer? Well, that's where we're going next, all right? So how do I write well? The things that I'm going to share with you, I'll back up a second. The things that I'm going to share with you, this is not comprehensive, all right? One of the things I've learned in life is that the more you know, the more you realize there's more you don't know. And so I'm just going to share some things that I have found to be like a force multiplier, right? So that if you pay attention to these couple of things about the writing elements of writing, style of writing, if you pay attention to these things and you have a command over your writing, then it's going to help in a number of different areas as well, all right? So the first thing is this. We need to pay attention to sentence structure. Second, we need to pay attention to sentence mood. 3, we need to pay attention to sentence voice, all right? So maybe some of you are going, what? I don't even know what some of those words mean. So let me unpack that with you for a little bit. Let's start with sentence structure, because there are 4 types of sentence structures that we need to be aware of as we write. The first one is just a simple sentence structure, and a simple sentence structure is a single independent clause. It will have a subject, a verb, and a direct object. That is a simple sentence. Here's an example of a simple sentence. The judge listened to the defense attorney. All right, the second kind of sentence structure is a compound sentence. All right, that is two independent clauses joined by a conjunction. All right, let's look into this example here. The judge listened to the defense attorney, comma, and the jury took notes. Here's a third type. That is one of a complex sentence. All right, a complex sentence has a single independent clause and at least one dependent clause. Let's give an example. Because the defense attorney presented new evidence in the case, comma, members of the jury took notes. Let's start with the dependent clause first. The dependent clause is because the defense attorney, here we are right here, because the defense attorney presented new evidence in the case, that's the dependent clause. The independent clause is members of the jury took notes. That's an example of a complex sentence. Okay, the fourth type of sentence structure is kind of a combination of the previous two, and that is a compound complex. Compound complex sentence structures have two independent clauses, right? They can stand alone on their own by themselves. It is a complete sentence in and of itself. But it also has at least one dependent clause. Here's an example. Because the attorney presented new evidence in the case, members of the jury took notes, and the prosecution instantly objected. The dependent clause in this case is because the attorney presented new evidence in the case. So that's an overview of sentence structure. Let's look at sentence mood. There's a couple different types of moods, a couple different moods in sentences. The one is the indicative mood, all right? An indicative statement, indicative sentence is simply a statement of fact, all right? Here's an example. The attorney was well prepared and articulate. Here's a sentence, a second type of sentence mood, and that is the imperative. It's a statement of command. Here's an example. Give me your undivided attention. Notice that the subject of imperatives is always implied. The subject is you. In other words, we're saying you. Give me your undivided attention. So that's an imperative. Number three, we have a subjunctive mood. A subjunctive mood is the statement of probability, possibility, wish, or doubt. Here's an example. Because the prosecution's case is so weak, the judge may dismiss the case. Whenever you have a question about, is this subjunctive, is it indicative, always look for those keywords such as may, or might, or could, or should, or would. Those are good indicators of it, that your sentence may be in subjunctive mood. And the fourth mood is this. That is the interrogative. Interrogative sentences are simply a statement of question, all right? So, example, will the judge dismiss the case? That's an example of an interrogative. Okay, some of you are thinking like, oh my goodness, I got this, I'm on top of it, and you're like, can you please just move on and get to some other stuff? Others of you are like, oh wow, this is really, really good. It's a helpful review of high school grammar, you know? All right, the last thing I want to touch on is voice. There's two types of voice in any given sentence. The first one is active voice. In an active voice sentence, the subject, it performs the action of the verb. All right, let me give you an example. The judge dismissed the case due to lack of evidence. In this case, the subject of the sentence is the judge, the verb is dismissed, and you ask yourself, can the subject perform the action of the sentence or the action of the verb? Absolutely. The judge dismissed the case due to lack of evidence. The second type of voice in a sentence is that of passive voice. In a passive voice sentence, the subject cannot perform the action of the verb. Here's an example. The case was dismissed. The case in this sentence is the subject. Was dismissed is kind of the verb. It's the verbal element of the sentence. But you have to ask yourself, can the case dismiss itself? The answer is no. I think of my high school English teacher, Mrs. Boggs, who taught us that this basic rule is, or for passive voice is this, that if you have a past tense verb, past tense action verb that is preceded by the helping verbs is, am, was, were, be, being, or been, then you are setting yourself up for passive voice. And that's exactly what we have in this case. We have the helping verb was preceding a past tense action verb. The case was dismissed. The reason why we need to pay attention to voice in our writing is that active voice is much stronger. Passive voice is very, very weak, just as the name itself implies. So we want to use active voice whenever possible, and that's going to make our writing so much stronger. Okay, here's some bonus tips that I'll pass along as you think about writing newsletters. The first one is this: ruthlessly edit. Eliminate all unnecessary words and sentences. And here's what I found in most of the newsletters that I've read and most of the newsletters I've written, that most adverbs and adjectives can be dropped without losing any major meaning of what I'm trying to communicate. Those adverbs, remember, adverbs will modify other verbs, adjectives modify other nouns. And I can strip those things out, strip those words out, and it doesn't take away from what I'm trying to say. Here's why this is important: because it keeps you from becoming too wordy. The more words you have in your text, the longer it takes to read. And our goal is to write a newsletter that can be read in 2 minutes or less. Second, never write and send or print in the same day. I have found a really good tip is that I will start a newsletter on Thursday and I will not plan to send it until Friday. Because this allows me, that 24-hour wait time allows me to marinate and to think about what I've written. And maybe I need to eliminate some things that I put in there that are kind of extraneous and not necessary. And that wait time helps me to get an even better newsletter than if I try to send it in the same day. Number 3, always get someone else to read your newsletter. I will read my newsletter out loud to myself just to make sure I've not missed a word, or maybe there needs to be a comma, but invariably, almost inevitably, I am going to miss something. And so I always have at least Bonnie, maybe somebody else, read what I've written to make sure that it sounds right and it makes sense and I'm not missing any words, because I care about the newsletters we send out. I want to put quality content out there, and I want to communicate that I am concise, I am purposeful in everything that I do. Number 4, always aim to use the active voice, avoid passive voice whenever possible. I alluded to it just a moment ago, but by doing this, you will strengthen your newsletter, you'll strengthen your voice, and you're not going to come across as weak. And it's going to force you to be crystal clear on what the subject of your sentence is and what the verb of your sentence is. This leads me to my next point here. Number 5, select verbs carefully. Verbs carry the meaning of your sentence. And if you carefully select your verbs and you're selective in how you're using to communicate the meaning of your sentence, it can dramatically improve the quality of your writing. Sometimes we will get caught up into a rut where we will use the same verbs over and over and over again. An easy pitfall to make is the equative verb is. If you're using is too frequently in your writing, that means you're adding some other dependent clauses into your writing. And invariably, when you add the dependent clauses in there, it's going to lengthen your sentence, and it's going to make it your whole newsletter a little bit longer, and it's going to be hard to maintain that 2 minutes or less guiding principle. Number 6, imagine you're talking to a person. Oh my goodness. When I sit down and write a newsletter, one of the first things that I do is I start every newsletter with "Dear Steve." And I picture that donor, Steve, in my mind. And I think about Steve. And I imagine as though I'm sitting across the table from Steve and I want to enter into a conversation. That helps my writing to become a whole lot simpler and a whole lot more practical. And I'm not giving a ministry report to a board of directors. I am speaking to a person. And that helps me to keep my writing super, super concise. Last thing is this. You might be a little bit overwhelmed with everything that I've said so far. And you might think, oh my goodness, I don't even have time to do all of this stuff. And the expectation is not that you would do everything all at once. Remember, this is 16 years worth of stuff that is coming to you in a very, very concentrated form. So remember this, that something is better than nothing. Not every newsletter is going to be perfect, and that is okay. Because what's more important than anything else is that you attempt to communicate with your donors. Let me take a second here and just share with you some evidence, like to validate everything that I've been saying, because I have consistently been applying these principles and these tips over the past 16 years. And so let me just share with you, this is a little report. We use MailChimp. You can use Constant Contacts or other distribution services, but I found MailChimp to be really helpful. And so here you can see the report. This is a report of the last ministry newsletter that we sent out. You can see it has 376 participants right here. And notice that our open rate is 36.8, right? Earlier in the video, I said the industry average for nonprofits is about 22.9% open rate, and here we are 36.8. That means we are beating the industry average pretty considerably, and I would say that's a really, really good open rate. And believe it or not, 36.8 is kind of down from what our normal average is. The previous month, we were just about on target with our list average of about 44%, which honestly, when you think about it, that's pretty good. That's pretty good that many people are opening our newsletters and reading it and digesting some of the things that God is doing through our ministry, and that's a really, really good sign. And that's a really good indicator that all of these tips that we're providing you actually work. And so I can all but guarantee that if you adopt some of our tips and utilize some of our guiding principles, that it's going to make a big difference. All right, so we did the problem, we covered the solution, and now let's look at an application. I think I've got two here. For your next newsletter, apply at least 3 of the 7 bonus tips. More would be even better. So that previous slide, I listed out 7 things. Try to pick at least 3 things that you could apply for your next newsletter, and I guarantee it will make your newsletter a little bit better and a little bit easier to read for your ministry partners. The second application is this: follow the guiding principles. It's that simple, all right? What are they? Text light, picture heavy. Can it be read in 2 minutes or less? And always, always, always have a bias to highlight a student transformation story. It'll make your writing better, it'll make it stronger, and your donors are going to thank you for it because you're honoring their time and they recognize that you're busy, you're easily distracted, and you need stuff in bite-sized, concentrated formats. All right, so there it is, how to write winning newsletters. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And I do hope that you've taken some really, really simple, practical things away from this. If you found it helpful, please like the video, share it with a friend who maybe is going through that deputation process of raising funds, or go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We would greatly appreciate it. All right, we'll see you later.